All right, hey there, fellow coder. Welcome to our coding series where we are building a real-world web app from scratch using React as a front end and Spring Boot as a server side. So in this lesson, we're going to be diving into some refactoring of our code because I want to tidy up some of our React code. So if you want to see how someone like myself who has about 14 or 15 years of coding experience refactors his code, stick around. All right, fellow coder, let's dive into the good stuff. So in this one, like I said, I want to refactor some of the code, namely the part of the fetch, when the fetch happens. So basically, all of this code, more or less, can be refactored out such that it can be reusable, I almost said, reusable or modular, aka reusular. So yeah, we want to be able to reuse this code over and over again, where we inject the bearer token if we have one, and we want to be able to stringify a body if we have it, and the request method can be sent in, that kind of thing. So basically, we're going to need to have a JavaScript service that enables us to essentially do our own custom fetch statement. So let me think. One way to do this is to create sort of like a folder called services. And then inside of services, we can have a new file. Oops, I just said new. Oh yeah, new file. So we'll call this, the fetch service, I guess. I don't know if it's just going to be a fetch service, but we'll call it fetch service for now. We can always refactor the name later. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to expose a function called... well, I want to call it fetch, but you can't call it fetch because that would be a collision of names. Let's see, what's a good... There's like post, put, whatever, delete. I guess we call it like ajax, because sometimes we say in other languages that's called ajax, which is an asynchronous JavaScript and XML call. We'll call it ajax for now. Well, that's not the greatest name, but I don't want to sit here thinking forever about a name, although you should. Do as I say, not as I do. You should take a long time to think about what a great name is. So anyway, now, what will this take in? Well, we don't know yet what inputs will come into this ajax function. We should export it. We can probably export it as the default, method here, default function. And then let's just copy this and paste it into here, because then we're going to see all of the things that are not correct. So one thing that we pass in is a URL, right? So basically we would then replace this with a URL, right? The content type header, blah, 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 authorization, JWT. Well, we only want to include an authorization piece here if we have one. So we can basically pass in a JWT. Now, do we need to pass in a JWT? What if we made this... I would love to make it so that I don't have to have the JWT code littered everywhere. It would be nice if it could do that in one spot. Because really all we need to do is we need to call the use local state, right? JWT like this. And then we can say const, JWT and set JWT, even though we don't need a setter. Right? Then we don't need to pass in a JWT, and I think we'd be able to bring this in. Oh, did that not work? Use local state. Use local state. So it doesn't like that. It says use hook is called, right, it's a hook, right? So that's why we can't do that inside of here. So this is not a stateless component or a component or whatever. It is just a function, and this is saying, hey, use local state leverages hooks, and in order to do that, in order to have the life cycle of being able to use a hook, like a use effect hook, it has to be inside of a component, right? Is that what it's saying? It's calling a function that is neither a React functional component nor custom React hook function. Now, there might be a way to make this into a custom React hook function, but I don't want to get that complex. So one other solution here is to create this as a functional component, but that does kind of muddy the water. That does not make me feel great in terms of doing that. So I think for now, I'm gonna rely back on my first thought, which was to pass in the JWT, the JSON Web Token, and then we can find out another way, excuse me, another way to refactor this code later outside of here. So when we pass in, like for example, over here, when we need to pass in a JWT, we have to do the use local state everywhere, right? So maybe we can create some sort of mechanism to always inject the JWT. We'll see. We'll see what we come up with. Now here, there could be a body that we want to pass in, right? This would be the, request body. And this would be request body. But in the case that the request body is null, this causes a problem, right? So basically, this whole thing here kind of needs to be dynamic. Right, this whole object that I've selected here needs to be dynamic. So really, this is the what is this called? Do they have a name for this? For fetch? Show me the. So it says request info end. Show me the rest. How do I get access to the rest? Show me your secrets. Anyway. There's probably a name for this object, but anyway, I'll just say this is the, const, we'll call this fetch data equals an object. And this object will contain headers. Okay. Now, yeah, even the headers are going to need to be a little bit dynamic. Interesting. So for sure, we'll have the content type of application JSON. That will always be the case as far as I'm concerned. We'll always have content type application JSON. The method will change. Oops. So the URL will say the method JWT request body. So the method will be the request method. Just give it a different name. Cool. And then maybe a body, but sometimes you don't have a body. Like when you do a GET request, there is no body that goes along with it. So that's where this is going to have to be a bit dynamic. So we can say if we have a JSON Web Token passed in, then we need to say fetch data dot headers dot authorization equals bearer and then JWT. So we are going to change the fetch data data, right? We're going to update it to have authorization. And then we can do the same thing with body, right? We can say if request body. So if we have a request body, then we can say fetch data dot body equals JSON stringify the request body, right? And then all of this object here can be deleted and replaced with fetch data. Okay. Oops, not fetch. Cool. And then we have the response. If it's a 200 response, then we return response JSON. Now this response JSON, we will need to do what? It's like we need to return all of this, right? We need to return the return. In other words, it should return a promise, I think. If all goes well, it will return a promise, okay? So with that in mind, now that we saved that code, we can come over here to our save method, and instead of calling fetch and doing this stuff, we essentially can call our ajax function, right? So I hit enter, so that imported it from services/fetch service. So the ajax, the first parameter that we pass in is the URL, okay? Second parameter is the request method, which in this case is put. Third is JWT, which we have. Fourth is the request body, which we have, which is assignment. Boom. So that means we can delete all of this. and do a dot then on it. If all goes well. Okay, there's seemingly no errors. Let's go into one of these guys. Lots of errors. Okay, where are we getting it from? Did I mess up some of my old code? Let's see. Oh, key prop. Okay, that one we can ignore for now. That's not that bad of that's a warning, not an error. I guess all these are warning. Value prop on input should not be null. Okay, which one? Assignment view, input h3 div, localhost, whatever. If I click on that, am I actually going to see? No. Bundle. Oh, it would be nice if you gave me more information than this. Value prop on input should not be null. Private assignment view div h3 input. So assignment view, which div? So this one, the value GitHub URL is saying it's null, but it's not null. It should have a value here, right? I thought we fixed this in the last video. Am I missing something? Assignment branch, assignment GitHub URL. GitHub URL branch. We're using state. So I don't see why. Oh, unless, you know, it might be happening. It's probably updating or fetching the data here. And when it assigns the assignment data, it might be null there, potentially, because there's nothing in here. Yeah, that's what's happening. It's null from the database. So it's pulling null from the database. Well, what are you going to do? That's just coming from the database. So this is not entirely helpful. And then a component is changing the controlled input, right, because it was null, and then it changed it to be, I guess, blank or something. So if I type something in here, it's going to work, right? Yeah, so let's do a GitHub URL, you know, github.something2, oops, github.something2, and then a branch. You can say main again. Now, really what we're testing here is when I say submit assignment, it's going to run the save method, which now has our refactored code. So let's just see if this works. I click submit. Did anything happen? I didn't see anything. Did it do an update? It did. So if I come back here, come back here and refresh this page, there it is. So it looks like my code worked, right? Let's go back, click on assignment 3. Yeah, cool. Main 2, submit, back, assignment 3, main 2. Submit it back to main, refresh. Sweet, excellent. Okay. So there you go. Magically it just works. I love it when the code works the first time. So now we can leverage this elsewhere. So right here, there's another one, right? There's a GET request. So we can say ajax, and the URL is this, right? And then the request method is GET, and then the JWT we have one, and there is no request body now. And then we can do this and save. Oops, there's no ending semicolon. I had ended it with a semicolon, but I wanted to chain in a dot then. So this is what will load the assignment data, which, as you can see, if I refresh, it actually loads the assignment data, right? If you go to assignment 1, there's nothing here. Assignment 2, there you go. It's loading stuff from assignment 2, assignment 3. So it's working. So that's great. Now, what we tested there was not having a request body to make sure it didn't cause any problems. I don't think it did. Great. Let's see. What else can we do, right? You see how our code is a lot simpler now, in here anyway. And what that allows us to do is inside of the, service, where is it? Fetch service. Inside of here now, we can do stuff for like errors. So now if there's any error, so right now we return response JSON, but we can say else, response.status is, greater than or equal to 400, or just say equal to 400, right? This would be a bad request. So now we can do something specific for the 400 error code, or the 404 error code, or the 500 error code, right? We can do something different if the response is something other than 200, right? So it just gives us more flexibility because now the error handling, if you will all be in one place in this fetch service, right? Which is nice. It's nice when all of the complexity of the fetches and everything are just in one place. Yeah, and then you can, it's just nicer for it's all in one place. I don't know how else to say that. It's just nice when it's all in one place. You don't have to go and change a bunch of code in 5 million different places. So the other thing that I want to dive into really quickly to refactor is on this page. I said this one's not as important, but I do want to dive into it. On the dashboard page, it's giving us this warning about the dashboard in a div. So if I flip over to dashboard index.js, oh look, there's more code we can refactor here. Let me just refactor this real quick, and then I'll dive into what I was just about to do. So we get rid of this, and then method type is post, and then JWT we have one, and then is there no body? Oh, I guess there's no body because this is creating an assignment. And then that will be the dot then. There we go. Same thing here. We do ajax. URL is this. The request method is a get this time. The JWT exists, and we won't have a body because it's just a get request. And then boom. See how much nicer or cleaner our code is? Oh, it's just so beautiful. So on this one, okay, with this error, it says each child in a list should have a unique key property. So what it's complaining about is this. So we are we're iterating through the assignments as a JSON, well, first it was a JSON string, and then we turned it into an object. And that object is this assignments object. And then we're going through that array of assignments and going through each one of them and assigning them to a div. The problem is when you do this, it likes to be able to uniquely identify each one of these divs. And that's where it's saying you should have a key property. So the div should have a key property, which comes from React, and you set a key for each one of these divs. So the obvious, at least obvious to me, key that we can use is what makes each of these divs unique is the assignment's ID, because each of these divs represents an assignment. Right? So we can say the key is just assignment.id, like this, and then we can refresh the page, and then that warning goes away, right? So anytime you do a .map and where you're creating, elements, React elements, JSX elements inside of this kind of .map notation, or even do it for each or something, you have to remember to assign a key because it likes to be able to uniquely identify all of them. I'm sure there's a very good reason for that. I just can't remember off the top of my head what the specific reason is why it needs to uniquely identify each one of these things. I'm sure it has to do with React and painting or something like that. So, okay. So that is good there. And in terms of the error messages that we were getting before when we had like a null, like these ones, because these are empty, the only thing I can think of is when you are reading in the data, which is where? Here? Yeah. For the assignment data, the only thing I can think of is if those values are null, then set them to be an empty string, right? That, I believe, would solve the problem. So we can say if assignment data dot branch, essentially is null, then you can say assignment data dot branch equals empty string, right? But this just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to do this. So I don't know if this absolutely needs to be done. GitHub URL equals blank string. One way to avoid this is just to fix this on the server side. See, now when I refresh, it's good. You can make it instead of being null in the database, you can make it an empty string in the database. You could do this in the Java side. In Java, you can have it so that it will change the data from null to an empty string. Or you can fix it from the front end here. I just don't. None of it feels good to me because it's null. That's for, in my opinion, null is the proper variable type, data type, or data to be assigned to these particular properties, branch and GitHub URL, because they haven't been set yet. So yeah, I don't know. This one's up in the air. I could take it or leave it, but it does get rid of the warnings. I'd have to do more reading if you get rid of this code, if you comment it out and refresh. I'd have to read about what the ramifications are of this particular warning. I just don't know for sure what the ramifications are. But for now, because there's nice ugly red warnings in here, I'd rather not have them, so I'll just do that. Cool. So there, we've done some refactoring on our code. I'm sure there's lots more that we can do, but at least we have that one, this one ajax, refactoring in place, and then we can do this or replicate this elsewhere. Like, is there anywhere else that we use? Yeah, like here in the login page, I can refactor this code as well really quickly. But you get the gist. So I'll do that now. And while I'm doing this, I'll try to be, multi-functional, which never works. I can never multitask. And I will say things like, thank you so much for subscribing if you haven't already. Above me will be probably a little circle that you can subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss the next episode that comes up in this series. I hope to see you in the next lesson. I'm sure in the next one we'll dive into something way more exciting, like moving forward with our design of what we can do once we've submitted an assignment, like changing the state of the status, right? The status, once you submit the assignment, this needs to be changed, right? It needs to be changed to a different status. So we'll go over that most likely in the next lesson. So thank you so much for following, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson. As always, take care of yourself. Happy learning, and bye for now.